Same kind of thing goes with the spraying of the skies. You get all these ridiculous sites say, do you believe in aerial spraying? That's a belief system. Do you believe? No, I know there's aerial spraying because all the facts are out there. The media ain't going to go into them for you. They're too busy distracting you with other things. Things like show conferences like the Copenhagen Treaty. Nothing but a show. Everything was signed years beforehand. These show conferences are just to familiarize the public with the expectations of more to come. That's all, as they implement their plan. And they can't even tell you any kind of truth afterwards, except, well, we didn't really achieve anything, and bingo, everyone's putting carbon taxes on anything before supposedly anything's signed. It's all shows. These international meetings are really shows. That's what they're for. Because in governance, and that's what we're under, is governance. Governance, remember, is where a scientific rulership basically work on behalf of their masters, the guys with the money. And the scientific rulership or dictatorship decide through their superior intellect, this is what they're going to do, and there's no need to tell the rats in the laboratory. Why frighten them and be inhumane when you're going to inject them and cut them up tomorrow? I mean, that's basically it, you see. And what they can count on, too, is the general public are so domesticated that you see, unlike a wild animal that would notice anything different in its environment because it's on the alert for survival. We have been dumbed down, chemicalized down, and stupefied down with entertainment and farcical education, that we wait until the big boys themselves, the perpetrators, actually tell you what they're doing, which generally is 40 or 50 years after they've done it. That's complete domestication. It's interesting that if you go into the writings of people like Charles Galton Darwin, a real beauty of a guy. He was one of them, those guys. And Charles Galton Darwin, again, related to the Huxleys and related to Thomas as well, Huxley, and related to Darwin's themselves. With all the inherent qualities of massive depression and strange obsessions, put it that way, in various areas. But he wrote a book called The Next Million Years. And the next million years outlined the elite's plan for the world and how they'd run those guys down below. Them, the its. We're the its, you see. They're the thems, we're the its. Back with more after this break. Hi folks, I'm Alan Watt and we're cutting through the matrix. Just talking about the thems, that's those guys that work for government in all kinds of capacities and levels, and the its, which are us, you see, us are the its, you might say. But Charles Galton Darwin put out in his book The Next Million Years really what the agenda was. Massive depopulation. He was also the one who advocated the sterilization by various means, preferably covert means to sterilize the unwanted, the unfit, and all the rest of it. This is the 1950s, after World War II, by the way, and he spoke on behalf of the British elite and the establishment, the noble classes. But he said eventually we'll alter basically the IQ level, will domesticate the species. And that's been done. The people have had their minds attacked. I think they've actually physically had their brains attacked, physically, through inoculations and so on. And he said himself, he says, but we, the elite, mustn't have these things done to us because we are steering the ship of Earth. We are guiding it, so we have to retain our wild capabilities. But the rest of us, you see, we're dumbed down, basically chemically lobotomized, and we'll give them no trouble. That's the whole point. We give them no trouble. We just go along with whatever is done to us. Domestication. We don't see what happens around us. We can't think why things are happening. People don't even look up at the sky. I see wild animals going round here. If there's anything different on a fox's trail, believe you me, a branch going down even, he'll circle the thing quite a distance away to make sure that's all that's happened, that's all the change. He makes sure that's all it is before he'll move on. That's how they survive. That's how they're still around. But humans, See nothing. They really see nothing. And it's like Brzezinski said, shortly the public will be unable to think for themselves. They'll expect the media to do their reasoning for them. That has happened. He wrote that book Between Two Ages in the 1970s. That's happened to most folk. They wait for the media to tell. Well, the media is not there to tell you the truth. They've even been sued by journalists who've been hired, like Fox News was, because they were getting censored on a story because it was a big story on a big company and they got ads from it. And so these particular journalists sued them since it had a contract, and the judge said, well, there's nothing that says, nowhere does it say that the media must tell the public the truth. And yet, of course, we're trained to believe it does. It's an appendage of your brain. That's what most folk think. They keep you 20, 30, 40, 50 years behind the times. That's what they do. And when something crops up that you should see, or a few people are noticing, in comes their propaganda. They're the first to put out the propaganda. Like the noctilucent clouds that suddenly started appearing, and they try to tell you how far back they went, and they were not new at all, and all this rubbish. It was all rubbish. Always putting the spin on things so that when you tell an idiot, and there's lots of idiots out there, have you ever looked at the sky and wondered what all those lines are? And they'll tell you, must be a lot of aircraft, you know. There's about 2 aircraft going into Sudbury per day here. That's about it. Meanwhile, you've got about 15 in the air spraying back and forth. Well, I don't know. But they're gone. Most folk are gone, and you've got to accept that. Or you'll spend your life battering your head, trying to use your ego to dominate their ego until they admit you're right. That's a killer. Don't fall into that trap. Most folk will do that with their families. All you do is get kicked out, or they'll move off, or something like that. You can only use your time on people who are worthwhile to use it upon. Ones who are already asking questions. If they're asking questions, that means they're not quite so lobotomized as the rest. They have a bit of wildness there, of survivable capabilities. Now, I've gone in quite depth for years actually, because when the spraying started here daily in Ontario, daily it started in 1998. I can remember the day it started. I couldn't believe it when I walked outside, and they were much lower at that time, doing heavy, long trails from horizon to horizon, and it literally was like a checkerboard, north, south, east, west. And it's been like that ever since. They're a bit higher now. They've got better stuff to mix together that form into this mushy eggshell color much quicker than the old types that they used. And they are adding to it with different things here and there. That's why your throat gets raspy or sore throats. That's why about 60% of the public get recurrent bronchitis now. They just don't know what causes it. That's why everyone's allergic to everything. They call it allergies. Well, no wonder you're being poisoned, folks. This article here sums up a lot of this. I'm going to read quite a lot of it tonight because it's well worth it, and it's got a lot in it. And it's not speculation. It's from government sources themselves. And it's from the Wise Up Journal. And it's from the 13th of April, 2010. Howard Hughes Company, the company's climate change fight, it says. We're so familiar with nonsensical trivia that fills so many news mediums these days that the following information might appear the same, but it's quite the opposite. It will soon become apparent from authorized sources how important it is. To give the subject proper consideration, we need to look at a number of these sources, including an important government-funded report, an article published by the New York Times, written by Pulitzer Prize winner Seymour M. Hersh, reminding us of some old facts, and some other governmental sources. And I'll read some of this text when I come back. I mean, it really is on the ball. And I've got all this stuff already, and I've read this book, so I'll touch on some of the main parts of it and implications of it for you too. We're living in a fantasy, folks. Back after these messages. Hi folks, this is Alan Watt and we're cutting through the matrix. reading an article from WiseUp on the spraying and the governmental sources that you can go to see, yep, they're doing it all right, and how they've gone about it up till this present time, and where they want to go with it. It says the text below is taken directly from the United States government patent site. The restricted for government-only domain.gov can be seen in the site's address. It shows a technology with patent number, and it gives you the number by Hughes Aircraft Company, filed in 1990, with relating technology filed back in 1965. Keep in mind that the US government funded a large 1992 report titled, and this is a very important report or book really, Policy Implications of Greenhouse Warming, Mitigation, Adaptation, and the Science Base. By the way, you can get it on PDF and on Scribd, I think, if you do a search. There's a few places you can get it for free, which can be read from the archive of the National Academies Press. You can also go in there too and take it basically chapter by chapter. Discuss this technology on a global scale and expressed, quote, the surprise of this analysis is the relatively low costs. This is what they're on about, the low costs of dumping aluminum oxide and various other metallic oxides into the atmosphere. And they said at the time, we can do this within 2 years. That was published in 1992. It says, we'll read some more detailed extracts from this report momentarily and see how current administrations support it. But first, the technology that Hughes Company developed decades ago. Now, all the links that I'll mention are on the site, the gov links and whole bits from the government itself. So there's no conspiracy here. It's from them, them, those guys. And it's got the patent numbers and all the rest of it too, and links to the patent numbers. But listen to this. This is what's in this particular policy implications of greenhouse warming. That all the big, it's a Bible for these guys at the top. It says stratospheric Welshback seeding for reduction of global warming. This invention relates to a method for the reduction of global warming resulting from the greenhouse effect, and in particular to a method which involves the seeding of the Earth's stratosphere with Welshback-like materials. Most current approaches to reduce global warming are to restrict the release of various greenhouse gases such as CO2, CFC and methane. These imply the need to establish new regulations and the need to monitor various gases and to enforce the regulations. One technique proposed to seed the metallic particles was to add the tiny particles to the jet fuel of jetliners so that the particles would be emitted from the jet engine exhaust while the airliner was at its cruising altitude. While this method would increase the reflection of visible light incident from space, the metallic particles would trap the long wavelength black body radiation released from the Earth. This could result in net increase in global warming. It said here, not decrease by increase. And you found that too. When you're spraying heavily in a summer with that polymer type material C, it actually increases the heat down below. So such materials can include the class of materials known as Welshback's materials. Oxides of metals such as aluminum oxide are also suitable for the purpose. The greenhouse gases layer typically extends between 7 and 13 kilometers above the Earth's surface. The seeding of the stratosphere occurs within this layer. The particles suspended in the stratosphere. And that's all I give, to suspend it in the stratosphere for as long as possible. This article also, I've gone into all these different sites, by the way, in the government sites. They admit that in sunrise and sunset you'll get these odd kind of rainbow effects around the sun. That's been getting seen now since 98 pretty regularly now. But they also mention in it too that they're going to use multi-battery and arrays of super lasers to pulse through the atmosphere. And I've seen the pulsation effects on some nights. It's like a piano, someone playing a piano from top to bottom, back and forth, rippling across the sky. They're actually doing this stuff. Have been for years, folks. To continue with this one here, it says here, it's presently believed that the particle sizes in the 10 to 100 micron range would be suitable for the seeding purposes. Larger particles would tend to settle to the Earth more quickly. By the way, they also use jet streams. That's why I get so much dumped on top of me here. It carries it all the way down, large carrying area, down to Buffalo and New York area. And it comes up. They also seed it heavily over Chicago area. The greenhouse gases are typically in the Earth's stratosphere at an altitude of 7 to 13 kilometers. They suggested the particle seeding should be done at an altitude of order of 10 kilometers and then be seeded by dispersal from seeding aircraft, where an exemplary technique may be via the jet fuel as suggested by prior work, remember, they'd already done the studies on it back then, regarding the metallic particles. The National Academy of Sciences, who have a U.S. Congress charter, organized the creation of the report, again, policy implication of greenhouse warming, mitigation, adaptation, and the science base. You got to, for those who have a brain and don't mind struggling through stuff, you'll find it fascinating. For the rest of them, forget it. It's not written for you. It's just not written. You'll lose interest, after a few sentences. As I said, on page 8 of the front matter, it states that the project was funded by the government, the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, and got other funding from a consortium of private foundations, again, the parallel government, including the Carnegie Corporation of New York, the Charles E. Culpeper Foundation, the William and Flora Hewlett Foundation, John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur Foundation, and the Alfred P. Sloan Foundation. The project had a massive amount of people involved, and United Nations man Maurice Strong, Maurice Strong, the technocrat, that's what he's called, a technocrat, not responsible to the public, but makes big agendas like the Earth Charter. He was there at the conception phase, as stated on page 3. This is from the government. These introductory pages show what specialists from private and governmental bodies were involved with tunnel knowledge in the fields of chemistry, law, the Air Force, biomedical engineering, civil and environmental engineering, genetics is involved, atmospheric physics, and economics, to name a few. Professors were brought in from the most upper-class colleges in the United States, such as Harvard, Yale, Carnegie, Berkeley, MIT, who constantly work with the United States Department of Defense, and MIT certainly does it more than others, the Rockefeller University, and so on. General Motors acquired Hughes Aircraft Company, plus its technology, and their vice president of the research laboratories, Robert Frosch, took part along with Joseph Glass, the director, vice president, and general manager of the fluorochemical division at DuPont, the world's second largest chemical corporation that also works with the military. There are many other notables, including John McLucas and former U.S. Secretary of the Air Force. On page 59 of the report, Hughes patented his way is listed amongst other options. The patent is to use aircraft to maintain a cloud of dust in the low stratosphere to reflect sunlight. Page 59 also states, geoengineering options appear technically feasible in terms of cooling effects and costs on the basis of currently available preliminary information. This is back in the early 90s, folks. On page 44 and 60, they expressed their delight at such low cost. They actually have it broken down when you actually go into that, the links I'll give you from the government, at so much per ton, which I'm sure the military, who don't mind spending billions in a single plane, could also share. By the way, they're using military jets. They decided eventually to change to military jets because when you force these metallic particles through the exhaust systems of jets, they tend to wear it out like a sandblaster would do, so they have to be special inside. Obviously, the titanium or some kind of carbide inside of it to stop it getting worn away as the stuff is blasted through. Perhaps one of the surprises of the analysis is the relatively low cost at which some of the geoengineering options might be implemented. On page 454 of the 1992 Global Geoengineering Report, they go into the costs of chemdrilling with Hughes-type technology. If a dust distribution mission requires the equivalent of a 500-mile flight, about 1.5 hours, the delivery cost for dust is $500 per ton. And ignoring the difference between the English and metric tons, a cost of 0.50 kilograms of dust. If 1010 kilogram must be delivered each 83 days, that's what they figured on, provided dust falls out at the same rate as soot, 5 times more than the 1987 total ton miles will be required. So that, they actually had figures in 87 as to what they were going to use on the public, but they started doing this about 94 instead up to 98. The question of whether dedicated aircraft could fly longer distances at the same effective rate should be investigated. So they decided to use the air forces for it. On page 459, the conflict of interest, so-called experts recommended going ahead with geoengineering as soon as possible. That was 92. And that the governments of the world can simply reduce as much CO2 as they care to pay for. So they're going to go ahead with this as soon as possible. And they said they could do it within 2 years. Cloud stimulation by provision of cloud condensation nuclei appears to be a feasible and low-cost option capable of being used to mitigate any quantity of CO2 equivalent per year. These possibilities appear feasible, economical, and capable of mitigating the effect of as much CO2 equivalent per year as we care to pay for. Lifting dust or soot to the tropopause or the low stratosphere with aircraft may be limited at low cost to the mitigation of 8 to 80 GT CO2 equivalent per year. Such systems could probably be put into full effect within a year or two of a decision to do so. And mitigation effects would begin immediately. Because the dust falls out naturally, if the delivery of dust were stopped, mitigation effects would cease within about 6 months for dust or soot delivered to the tropopause, and within a couple of years for dust delivered to the mid-stratosphere. The report by hand-picked experts and highly respected influential players ends up supporting this option as the most effective good news for GM. It's important to note that this technology is just a slight upgrade to the old geoengineering technology we forgot about or were not reminded about. The following two 1970s articles are from the New York Times archives, and I've got their links. I'll put them up on my site, cuttingthroughmatrix.com, at the end of the show. You can go and look them up yourself. But here's one from the New York Times, July 12, 1973. Senate urges the U.S. to seek end to all environmental warfare. Rainfall patterns are altered, growing support noted. The Senate gave overwhelming approval today to a resolution calling on the U.S. to take a lead in seeking an international agreement to prohibit environmental warfare such as past American rainmaking practices in Southeast Asia. They were using it in warfare over Vietnam and creating flood and mud areas all over so the enemy couldn't get through. Another article from the New York Times by Seymour Hersh, May 19, 1974. U.S. admits rainmaking from 67 to 72 in Indochina, a first in warfare. May 18, the Defense Department has acknowledged to Congress that the Air Force and Navy participated in extensive rainmaking operations in Southeast Asia from 1967 to 1972 in an attempt to slow the movement of North Vietnamese troops and supplies through the Ho Chi Minh Trail network. There you have government admitting they can change the climate decades ago. That international treaty was written up and ratified from 1977. That's at the United Nations. It's titled Convention on the Prohibition of Military or Any Other Hostile Use of Environmental Modification Techniques, and can be viewed on the Federation of American Scientists sites. The link is here, by the way, and on the Carnegie Endowment site, and the link for that's here too. This technology is obsolete, yet remarkably most of us would think it's a technology yet to be developed. Amazing how much we are not reminded of or not told about. And I'm telling you folks, we live in a completely fake paradigm. That's what the media, the general media, is there for. What the media does is to show you the side effects of policy implementations. Oh, look at that. Oh, isn't it terrible what they've done here? Oh, the cost of this, blah, blah, blah. That's what they give us, the side effects, the fallout, not the causes. Every day we get from media that it's normal for horrible things to happen to countries predominantly made up of brown or black people, and we don't bat an eyelid even if the pain is inflicted from a Western nation. But the question is, does unaccountable national security branches of governance have the same mindset when it comes to us, the peak of democratic civilized society? The UK, USA, France, Canada, and so on. Fortunately, there's an answer to that question, as briefly mentioned by the third largest newspaper in the UK, The Guardian. This is from the 21st of April 2002. A government report just released provides for the first time a comprehensive official history of Britain's biological weapons trials between 1940 and 1979. It's still classified after 79, folks. So this is what they have declassified. Many of these tests involve releasing potentially dangerous chemicals and microorganisms, that's bacterium and viruses, over vast swaths of the population without the public being told. That was all over Britain. The tests carried out by government scientists at Porton Down this is what it says. The report reveals that military personnel were briefed to tell any inquisitive inquirer that the trials were part of research projects into weather and air pollution. That was from 1940 to 1979. One chapter of the report, The Fluorescent Particle Trials, reveals how between 1955 and 1963, planes flew from northeast England to the tip of Cornwall along the south end and west coast, dropping huge amounts of zinc cadmium, highly carcinogenic by the way, sulfide, on the population. The chemical drifted miles inland as fluorescence, allowing the spread to be monitored. Cadmium is recognized as a cause of lung cancer, and during the Second World War was considered by the Allies as a chemical weapon. In another, this is what they do. This is what your own, them, your own them, as opposed to others them. This is what your own them does to you. In another chapter, Large Area Coverage Trials, the Ministry of Defense describes how between 1961 and 68, more than 1 million people along the south coast of England from Torquay to the New Forest were exposed to a bacteria including E. coli and Bacillus globigi, which mimics anthrax. These releases came from a military ship. And I've put that out before. They did the same off Norwich. And then they tested the whole population who hadn't a clue. And all the doctors were in it through the National Health Service, collecting the data for the government. Oh yeah, you're dying of cancer. We don't know how it happened. Oh, so are the young. Oh, it's a mystery. The report also reveals details of the DICE trials in South Dorset between 71 and 75. These included US and UK military scientists spraying into the air massive quantities of Serratia marcescens bacteria with an anthrax stimulant and phenol. Some families in areas which bore the brunt of the secret tests are convinced the experiments led to their children suffering from birth defects, multiple birth defects, physical handicaps and learning difficulties. The report also confirms use of anthrax and other deadly germs on tests aboard ships in the Caribbean and off the Scottish coast during the 1950s. The document states, this is the official document, tacit approval for stimulant trials where the public might be exposed was strongly influenced by defense security considerations aimed obviously at restricting public knowledge. The public are never told what's been done to them. You have never been in any democracy, folks. You've been in a never land. Back with more after these messages. This is Alan Watt, and we're cutting through the matrix. Everything is done under national security, and we're always kept in a state of flux or fear or war or Cold War. 2 world wars, many policing actions in between. In a Cold War, it terrifies that we're going to get nuked at any time. It's all for control purposes. Remember what Orwell said, that war is peace, peace is war, freedom is slavery, etc., etc. And they keep telling us we're free as we get put into deeper and deeper forms of slavery. But remember, too, he also had in his book 1984, when Winston's being tortured by O'Brien. O'Brien was one of them, them. And O'Brien says to him, he says, oh, the war is not meant to be won, Winston. It's meant to be perpetual, to maintain control over the people. That's what it's for. So we go through war after war. Now it's a war on terror, you see, and all your rights are stripped away. And then it's a war for the environment forever, as they depopulate. And by the way, on the site, and on the links I'll put up there to the mitigation of the effects of spraying, etc., you'll also see that the first few pages is devoted solely to depopulation. Depopulation was mandatory. They even say in this report that a side effect will be depopulation and possibly sterilization and a decrease of fertility. Oh, it fits the bill perfectly, doesn't it? Going back to this article here, it says, what are they doing today when the best and brightest minds decided in the Geo-Engineering report that such systems could probably put into effect within a year or two of a decision to do so, and the mitigation effects would begin immediately? It was a go-ahead signal for the military that the government had already paid for. That paragraph can be used as historical justification for the military to go into full effect with global geoengineering, and under national security laws they did not have to tell elected politicians or the public about it, never mind asking for their permission. And that's a fact. National security branches work together, especially with a perceived global threat. Despite the media blackout in current national security operations, there was one report from Germany's RTL News, is owned by the RTL Group, which is Europe's largest TV, radio and production company. Below are extracts from the 2007 news report that broadcasts, and here's the broadcast can be viewed. The link is here for you to see. It says here, clouds up to 350 kilometers long appear all of a sudden on the radar, but only on the meteorological radars. We can state within a 97% certainty that we have on our hands chemical trails. This is on the TV station, comprised by the fine dust containing polymers and metals. The radar images are stunning considering they needed tons of dispersed elements. Military heads claim that the substances used are not harmful. That's what the military claimed during that particular show that they put on there. Military planes from the German Federal Army are manipulating our climate. That came on the show as well. The register reports emissions of chemtrails at low altitudes. In the following 3 weeks, the instruments register other activities. Meanwhile, the satellite imagery is clearly counterfeited by the military. And I've had reports by guys who are up there as pilots who tell me the same thing. And then it says here, it's enormous. This is from a German politician, Johannes Rimmel. It says, obvious that enormous regions are being polluted with clandestine actions. The government must provide explanations to the unsuspecting population. If militaries around the world are spraying the atmosphere constantly, do you expect to be detected, right? Then it gives you more articles to show you, which literally back up all the stuff I've been talking about for here. We're really living in a never land, a fiction put out by the media and entertainment. But by God, we're enthralled by entertainment these days while all this is happening. Because after all, we're domesticated and we couldn't save our lives if we had to, at least for most folk. I'll put all these links up tonight on my site, cuttingthroughmatrix.com. From Hamish myself, from a heavily sprayed Ontario, Canada, it's good night, and may your God or your gods go with you. This is Alan Watt. We're cutting through the matrix. Last night I was talking about the geoengineering that's been going on for years, as they pretend they're only now discussing the possibilities of doing it, which is utter nonsense. They've been doing it for many, many years. They know the side effects, and that's really what they're discussing, is how to mitigate them or keep them from the public. And it's quite easy to keep anything from the public because we're not too bright. But the book that I was using yesterday was Policy Implications of Greenhouse Warming, Mitigation, Adaptation and the Science Base, published in 1992. The Bible, you might say, for the agenda. And I put the link up last night where you can go into the site yourself and government sites and download this particular book. But on page 433, it's got this to say. Remember, this is 1992, geoengineering. In this chapter, a number of geoengineering options are considered. Then they go through the different options and the hoopla to do with how it might or might not work. But they say here, other geoengineering possibilities include reforesting the United States. I guess if let people get off the land, you see, you can reforest it. That's why you want the habitat areas for Agenda 21. To increase the storage of carbon in vegetation, simulating an increase in oceanic biomass as a means of increasing the storage and natural sequestering of carbon in the ocean, and so on. Yada, yada, yada. It is important to recognize. Now, listen to this. Listen to this part here. 1992. For those who are still in their religious phase, who use words like, do you believe this, or do you believe that? Do you believe in global warming? Do you believe in Y2K? That's a religious thing, you see. This is 1992. It says here, it is important to recognize that we are at present means in the now, for the harder thinking. We are at present involved in a large project of inadvertent geoengineering by altering atmospheric chemistry, and it does not seem inappropriate to inquire if there are countermeasures that might be implemented to address the adverse impacts. You understand what that just said now? Come on, we're back in junior school here, right? Let's do it again, children. It says, it is important to recognize that we are at present involved in a large project of inadvertent geoengineering by altering atmospheric chemistry, and it does not seem inappropriate to inquire if there are countermeasures that might be implemented to address the adverse impacts. So they knew then that there already were adverse impacts, since they're talking about countermeasures that might be implemented to address them, to alter them. And people who can still think clearly, to an extent at least, and plow through their gobbledygook and their different phrases they use to make it sound very scientific, will get a lot out of it. Most folk won't, because most folk really want to go into conspiracy sites, you know. And where's this kind of exciting, these aren't exciting things to read. Nothing that really happens or is of import is very exciting. It's very boring, dull and dry, but it's the most important information you'll ever find in your life is when you go through this kind of stuff. So they admit then they were already engaged in this project, this geoengineering project, a large project, they said, and it's been going on for an awful long time. Britain, by the way, has just been warned it's in for another week of freezing sleet and snow and blizzards in April. But that doesn't matter. We're apparently going to fry to death to see if they don't save us and all that rubbish. Remember, there's different reasons behind all of this. What's interesting too in this policy implications of greenhouse warming mitigation, adaptation, and the science base, it starts off with humans are the problem, right out of the Club of Rome, because they're the guys that dreamt that one up and they're proud to admit it in their own book. So humans, it's all to get us to depopulate. Mind you, this stuff too, it does mention in the writings in the book that the side effects, some of the side effects will be sterilization of the general public and increased death rate, which is to their advantage, it says. To their advantage. Yeah, that's what it's about, folks. No conspiracy site there. You can go into the government one and find it, their own website.